Hi, and welcome to Inspiring Honesty. I'm your host, Brahe, and I'm an atheist. I'm going to be joined again today by my co-host, Bob Greaves. And we haven't really discussed at all what the topic of discussion is going to be. I know last week we mentioned a little bit, or we talked for a few minutes about secularism, and we were talking about the First and Second Amendment mainly and how they apply to our lives. Went a little bit more political with that. So I'm not entirely sure where today's show is going to go, but I know the things that I would love to talk about is, of course, it's Christmas season, so we've got to do a little bit of a Christmas special. I mean, what better than an atheist Christmas special? But otherwise, I really don't know. I'm looking forward to the rest of the show today. We'd love to get any input from you. I'd love to do just a little bit of an open forum for today's show to see if there's any topics you'd like to talk or like us to talk about as the coming year progresses, and anything you'd love to rehash that we have talked about in the last several months of the show. So with no further ado, welcome to the show, Bob.
Well, thank you, Greg. It's great to be here. You know, I really enjoy the conversations that you and I have. I find that they inspire honesty. And, you know, something that I haven't mentioned to you in a while that I really want to mention to you is this, that I think that it is people who are atheists, who have some clear thinking, who have some genuine issues with some of the things that we theists often say and think, that I really believe that you have contributed a great deal to the reality checks that have caused people such as myself, Dr. Jones, and many others to realize we need to rethink our views. And although we've continued to embrace a theism, it is a radically different theism than the kind that we used to embrace simply because we were going to believe, you know. And I think that the truth is, we didn't do this on our own. It wasn't until people with genuine objections began to articulate them well and clearly, and that some people just had to listen. And so, you know, I really want to encourage you and tell you that it really is a great deal of respect that some theists have for what the atheists are saying. That is a reason why we are all getting better at discussing all these issues. And so I find this show, for me, really inspires honesty, and I'm glad that you are there taking care of this, and I'm enjoying the privilege of being a part of it.
Thank you, Bob. I'll have you know, I hate our conversations, and I really, you know, they just they bore me. No, I have been blown away by some of the insight that you brought to the table, and I have to tell you, as I think I mentioned on the show before and in our own conversations, it's been a journey with you. It's when we first started the show, Bob and I had not met before. Our first show, we basically talked for what was maybe an hour and a couple of Facebook messages back and forth before the show, and it was, you basically watched our relationship grow and watched our first conversations on these topics. So it's been a progressive conversation, and I think we've grown into our knowledge of one another as well. But as I said before, you frustrate me sometimes, and I love it. It's fantastic. It's so easy to walk in, and Joey, the producer Joey, wrote or posted a picture the other day that made me think of you immediately, because it was a Christian or a theist in a atheist forum, or an atheist forum, to follow my English rules. And it was a picture of a chicken surrounded by lions or tigers. And it was so perfect for my experience in so much of what I have done, and what this show has really done for me. And I think I'm hoping it does for more people that are coming from my side of the fence, is to get them to stop that. There's no benefit to cherry picking and going. It's easy to make somebody who's new to the subject, or who's very uneducated on it, really look like a fool when you've spent a lot of time researching these things, and that's not productive, and it's not getting us where we are. Whereas, I looked at that, and all I could think was, well, not all theists would be in that situation. I mean, when I have conversations with you and with Dr. Jones, and even sometimes Joey makes himself look competent in these discussions. So um, it it makes it a very refreshing experience to know that there are theists, there are believers out there um, who are not just what you run into on such a regular basis in your online forums. It's it's refreshing in so many different ways to see that there's people out there that I have to admit I had a bit of a stereotype beforehand that there's not a lot of people who could be very very well educated about what the I guess the doctrines are, the scriptures, everything like that, and still have any sort of anything beyond a deistic faith. And I think you've proven me wrong there at the very minimum. Made me really rethink a lot of my positions on other people in that respect, and helped helped I think let the conversation grow into something that should benefit people from either side. So thank you for that. It's been a fantastic year, or well, half a year.
For anybody who's going to be honest, um, being proven wrong is going to be a common experience for all of us. And there's a sense in which we learn to move forward with deliberate effort to be clear and to be intelligent and to have good ideas, but at the same time we discover that all of this discovery is not just a work in progress, but it's also limited to what it is we as human beings are capable of dealing with and grasping. And we can, all of us, no matter what our position is, lose sight of the fact that our ability to argue a point is not the same thing as the point itself. So no one is a great proponent, a perfect proponent of any particular idea, and in a sense, um, we have to empathize with people we might disagree with in terms of the fact that making a clear, complete, thorough, exhaustive presentation of a point of view is not an easy thing to do, and we do need to even put forth the effort to do so. But that's why it's a dialogue. It's an ongoing process. It's a journey in many many ways.
It's been quite, or that and more. And I absolutely I don't know. I'm thinking about where we can go from here. I think that our conversations have been. There was a point when it was almost feeling like we were running out of things to talk about, and then it just exploded into as I got to know you better and we talked more. It seemed like there was nothing that we couldn't talk about, and there was so much more nuance and things that we can go into and the show can cover. So I'm reaching out to the viewers here. Give us some New Year's resolutions. Give us some ideas for what you'd love to see, to hear, guests you'd like to see on the show, anything like that. I can tell you that I've been compiling a list of people that I'd love to get on the show, and some of them might be a little bit lofty. I'm not sure how much success we're going to get with Queen Elizabeth, but I'm throwing it out there. And I don't know. It's just I want. There's so many things that I could talk with you about, talk with the viewers about. That I'm just having such a great time doing the show, and I'm so thankful for what we've had the opportunity to do. That I want to make sure that we're also giving back to the people who are out there watching us, supporting us, and knowing that we're covering what you want us to talk about, and I'm not just feeding my ego by coming up with whatever topic is on my mind that week. So, please let us know what your thoughts are. So, Bob, to go back into to last week's topic a little bit, now that I think we've primed the audience a bit, and please, audience, again, let us know. This is a feedback show. It's the end of the year recap here. But is there anything that you'd like to revisit from either our conversation last week? Extrapolate
Yeah, the
upon
time's so
or
short sometimes when you get into a very intense topic. I would want to at least make it known that I I am not a fan of the right or the left when it comes to gun control. I think that the left is living in a fantasy and an illusion of what it is they think can be accomplished, and I think that the right is just hanging on to their guns so strongly they're not willing sometimes to talk reason, and I am so many times I am critical of the arguments both sides are making, but personally. I really wish we could find a far more effective way of bringing a sense of safety and balance to the kind of a culture we live in. I do not believe that. I do not believe that the way we're currently doing things is going to continue to work for us. I really believe that violence is going to continue. It's going to be random, and but I really see this as something that is systemically part of our culture and the way that we live in a culture that I want to say does not give the kind of a damn it thinks it does about people and how they develop, how they come about, and we're all racing for uh, success. We're all racing for the top of the heap, as it were, a place no one really needs to be except one person, perhaps. We can't all be Bill Gates or whatever. And it's wonderful that he is, but we live in such a rat race where the people near the middle or at the bottom are denigrated for being there, and yet the truth is we do not have a culture that takes a look at our well-rounded needs and realizing that we need various people to participate in our culture in so many different ways that meet so many different needs. We need the janitor. We need the garbage. We need some of these people that we tend to look down on. We need the college professor. We need the entrepreneurs. We need a wider variety of people, but we live in a culture that, in my opinion, is so focused on everybody's got to go to college. Everybody's got to become a millionaire. Everyone's got to take responsibility for themselves. Everybody's got to do this. Everyone's got to think like we do. Everyone's got to, and we have this cookie cutter pressurized culture. It is not a surprise to me that there are some people who find, for one reason or another, either because they're not up to it for whatever reason, or because they've experienced damage or trauma and they've given up on something that for them has actually honestly become an impossible task. And then in anger and frustration, this sort of thing breaks out. And then people feel like, well, they should have done this, they should have done that. Well, all sorts of people should have done all sorts of things, but I really feel that we live in a culture that is disingenuous about the real core issues involved in this kind of violence. And so part of the main reason I'm opposed to both the left and the right on this particular argument of gun control is because, first of all, I see this as the manifestation of the problem, but not the problem itself. And secondly, I don't think that the way either of them would like to do this is going to work. And so I'm objecting to the impracticality of it all, not the heart of it. I tell you, I wish we could very quickly find a way of getting these guns under control, getting people who are going to own them, using them very responsibly. But I really think that the future of this kind of a problem is learning to find a way of being a culture that allows all people growing up within it to find a place, and that place doesn't have to be at the top, and that they can reach the place that is a good niche for them, where they can feel that they are a precious being and a part of our culture. And I don't think we're trying to do that.
You make an interesting point about the culture, and I know, excuse me, I know we talked about that last week. There's sometimes, though, I think that you need to make a catalyst of sorts, and the government can be a fantastic catalyst in many ways. If we look at, say, the civil rights movement of the 1960s or the women's suffrage movement, these are things that they're very organic, grassroots, cultural changes, but they were very strongly resisted by traditionalists. And I mean, the women's suffrage movement really isn't. Women's rights in general are still very much unequal to that of men. And I have to say, there have been a few times in the past, or in this show in the past, that I've made jabs about things being a man's job or a women's job. And I'm hoping that came across in the ironic fashion that I was trying to portray it as. I I cannot understand for the life of me how much we put roles and expectations on people based on what we think they should do. Yeah, I get a lot of flack because I don't have a full time traditional job. I work as a contractor when there's work available. Otherwise, I'm a stay at home dad, and I of course I do this show, and I'm very active in other ways with the community around me. But I love it. I get to spend days at home with my 2 year old son. We just celebrated his birthday. It was fantastic, and I have people who look down on me and who criticize my my relationship with my wife and my family because she's working. She's the one out. I mean, she's a full time teacher, and they look at that as because it's non traditional. It's a bad thing, and I think that that's just another one of the ways that we need to challenge cultural ideologies that are born into us and pushed into us. There's so many things. The same is true of the racism, of gender stereotypes, of sexism in general, or any form of discrimination. They're all taught to us, and they all can be untaught. But it's up to us to make that challenge. And unfortunately, especially when we talk about things like the gun culture, the culture of violence that Americans have, it's not always possible to do that without a catalyst in place. It's similar to doing something that when you have somebody that has lost everything, if you say somebody's house burns in a fire and they were uninsured, they've literally lost everything. They have no job, no means of supporting themselves. Telling them to go get a job is not going to do them any good. It's not possible in that situation. They don't have the means to even get to that point. Whether it's because they don't have clothes to wear to an interview, they don't have a shower, they don't have a meal so they can be thinking clearly before the interview. There's things that we need to do to help people and to get things along the way. And I think that the same is true on, as I think Nick would put it, the scale invariance. Just because it works beyond the level of an individual. When we talk about a society, the same is true. There are certain things that a society can't do on its own. It will need either a violent revolution, as has happened in the case of, say, the abolition of slavery, or it will need a different kind of force, something along the lines of a government intervention. And that's been done for the things like women's suffrage or desegregation. And I think that might be the only way. That's why I advocate for gun control. I'm not trying to say ban guns, but I think that until we as a culture grow past the violence that we have, we need to do something to help curb its effect.
I don't think there's anything wrong with the honest, we call it a threat, if you will, telling people who are gun owners, get control of your guns, or we will, take them away from you. It's kind of like sometimes when you're raising a kid, you sometimes as a parent you have to ground the child, or the child is held away from certain privileges until they learn certain priorities. And with a good parent, that strategy does not involve forever removing from the child a certain privilege, but rather withholding it until the child demonstrates a certain level of responsibility. And I think gun owners need to know that they had better start thinking in terms of their own sense of responsibility, or the sway of emotionality, which I think is a horrible way to try to control them, is nonetheless going to be powerful. Because how many times is this going to happen? And for good or bad, right or wrong, people are going to say enough is enough, and they're going to put an end to something. And I mean, for example, even the so-called war on terrorism, I don't think it's an honest war against terrorism. But at the same time, not to get overly political, but I look at the Patriot Act and I'm thinking, what? I mean, sure, we've got to do something, but it's only because of some of the horrifically traumatic situation and dramatic things that have happened that kind of thing could ever even happen. And so we need to kind of find an even keeled, responsible, genuine, and authentic way of making sure that that our culture operates according to appropriateness and balance and well-being, and we do leave the person who's not doing well aside. And I would even go so far as to say, I think that there's a lot of people who are not willing to admit the fact that, you know what, every time I meet an incompetent person, maybe I'm thinking to myself, well, good, there's one less person I'm competing with for reaching the top of the heap. You might think that way, but the truth is, this person is going to be somewhere. It's kind of like, like even our prison system, the way we think about it. I'm not interested in handing prisoners all sorts of privileges left and right. I'm not interested in overlooking the kind of things that criminals have done, and the responsibility we need to get them to own for some of these deals. But the way our current so-called criminal justice system is not taking this criminal element and turning them into an element that is any better in our culture. In fact, what we're doing is we are creating an even bigger and stronger criminal element.
Well, that may be the topic for a show entirely on its own. I'm going to write that one down quick. I think that when we consider criminals, specifically, a criminal is a defined term. That is a legal term that
Sure.
is very much related to somebody who committed a crime being something that is illegal. And illegal is defined by the culture. I had a professor in college who I've been trying to get on the show since it started, but he's dragging his feet. And he's been the inspiration for a lot of my enlightenment throughout my growth as an individual. He was a I forget the actual name of the department, but he's a sociology professor, criminologist. And as I said, I'm a biologist, but I took every class that he offered because it was just incredible the way that he was able to open my eyes to things that I just didn't understand about the world. And I think that that's a lot of what's dragging us down, is that there's so many people who just are like I was before that, or just ignorant of the reality that surrounds them. We're very good at understanding or feeling like we understand our own personal situation and the roads that got us to where we're at. But some of the things that we don't recognize, and this is one of the things we touched on last week, is the separation of church and state ideas, is things like the privileges that we have. I am a white man coming from a middle to lower middle class household, where I was able to and expected to get into college. I had a trust fund from my grandfather, who was a doctor, that paid for my tuition in college. That was a lot of privilege that I had, that allowed me to get where I got much, much easier than where other people can. So if I want to say, well, I got here myself, I worked myself all the way through this, that's true. I mean, it was my own effort that got me through to this point, but not alone. There was a lot more to what got me where I am today. And we need to think the same about criminals, or people who have been deigned criminals by our culture and our society. We need to understand what got them there and the realities of the system around them. Things like the extremely disproportionate amount of African American males that are prosecuted for crimes. Now, I'm not saying necessarily arrested. There's a certain degree of profiling that happens. But one of the things that a lot of people aren't aware of is that our criminal justice system, it's like a conveyor belt that takes you from arrest to prison. And for white people, the privilege is there's all kinds of places that you can jump off of it.
Yeah. Can I
the same is
share
not true for others.
Let me share with you a personal story. I am a criminal. I am. When I was a young man, my father didn't want to buy me an amplifier for my guitar, and I'm resentful of that, and he was a bit of a miser, which I think was his problem. But at the same time, I'm not sure I dealt with it. Well, I wanted an amp. And I wanted a PA system for my band. And so I found a bunch of guys that I knew would be the sort of people I could count on. They all had records. They all were in trouble. They all did this and that. And I organized these guys to help me break into this place. And we stole an amplifier system. They then, from there, went on from there to then go to some other place, and they stole some gas, and they got caught. And of course, when they got caught, in the trunk of their car is all this equipment. And of course, I get implicated in it. Well, I was taken down to the sheriff's office, and I was lectured to. I was never asked. I was lectured to, and my mom and dad came in there. My dad lectured me. I was up to way past midnight. But you know what? I wasn't actually arrested. I wasn't put in jail. I wasn't ever asked questions. I wasn't very much even allowed to speak. But I came from an upper middle class family. And to make a long story short, they never blamed me for this. I was never charged with a crime. And it never became the official record that this whole thing was planned by me. And I wasn't thinking at the time that, well, if I pick the right people, they'll end up being the ones who get blamed for it. But that's the way it worked out. And so I stole this stuff, and I'm not the one who paid for it. But these other guys that I did ask to help me with it, they're the ones who, they were young enough. Fortunately, it wasn't, life changing. But the truth was, it's because I was an upper middle class white guy that it was almost as if they worked overtime to make sure this didn't come down on me. Now, my dad lectured me to death, and he was angry, but I don't think anyone would have even believed me if I'd suddenly broken out and say, look, this was my idea. And of course, I'll be honest, I was a little kid. I mean, a young teenager. I wasn't going to volunteer this information.
This was last week.
Was that? No, it wasn't last week. It was at least 3 weeks ago. I'm kidding. I was a teenager at the time, But the point being is, I do remember even then thinking, this is not real. This isn't honest. This isn't a true official reflection of what was really going on. And I did have a sense, even a guilty sense, of privilege. And interestingly enough, several years ago, probably, I don't know, maybe 5, 6, maybe longer than that, my wife was at a pool, and she was there, and some young girl stole her wallet. We were able to figure out who stole it. We were able to find out where it was. We even got an anonymous message from a raspy speaking woman on the phone, saying that she'd found this wallet on the side of the road and was willing to return it. And we had a recording of this on our answering machine. Well, anyway, we called the police to try to get the credit cards and other things like that from the wallet back. As it turned out, the young girl who stole it actually lived in the neighborhood 1 block away from where I grew up. Nice neighborhood. The Broome County sheriffs lost our tape. They lost all the evidence we gave them. They never really interviewed the people, and they wanted to indicate that there just was nothing they could do about this. And the police officer looked at me, and he told me, look, she comes from a wonderful neighborhood, and we just don't believe that the people there are going to be doing this kind of thing. And I'm thinking, I grew up in that neighborhood, and it was even more upper class then. And so it's like I was just surprised that it was sort of like this is round two of the exact same story in the exact same neighborhood. It's not really,
Now
honest.
imagine the same situation for a 19-year-old African American from Milwaukee who wears baggy clothes and maybe some sort of, it has tattoos. I don't know, something that's going to in some way indicate his inner city upbringing. You think he'd have the same treatment in that situation?
I'll answer your question as soon as I'm done Googling the statute of limitations. Oh, I'm good. uh, yes, exactly. I remember even though I went to the Maine Endwell school system, and I remember back in I think it was 2000, there was an investigation that was going on that was trying to determine if some of the black kids in that school were involved in a drug ring. And I remember at the time thinking to myself, you gotta be kidding me. If you were of darker skin color and you went to that school district and you had anything to do with a drug ring, you're an idiot. And because I mean, the way that the culture would work, but also there was so much going on there with the rich white kids that it was almost like, well, we got this drug problem. Who's doing it? And to me, it was like it was insane. It was crazy to think that that was the sort of thing that was such an easy way of thinking about it. And I mean, so not just in terms of who we profile as to who it is, but if some, I would even say, if you take a look at the kinds of things that we consider criminal behavior and what we consider the appropriate penalty for different crimes. Now, sometimes these things do come around, but it's amazing. The drugs that are more likely to be used by upper white middle class people,
Oh,
and the drugs that are likely to be used by lower class minorities are different. But I tell you, if you take a look at the penalties that are involved for being found guilty for these sorts of things, it doesn't strike me as being uh, it's disproportional.
I know that at least when I was going through college, on average at the national level, I don't know if it was actually the federal laws or if it was just an average across local and state laws. The penalties for crack cocaine versus powdered cocaine were 500 times stronger, and I mean that's by weight essentially. It's you could get the same penalty for for 200 grams of crack cocaine that you could get for a kilogram of cocaine. And the scale was essentially the same, no matter how. I mean, you had to have, or I'm sorry, not two. Yeah, that math worked out. I think I'm off somewhere, but either way, it's I think it was 20, um, or 2 grams. I don't know. But you could have a small personal amount of crack cocaine and get the same penalty of somebody with a large amount, with the intent to distribute, very obviously. Um, and I very, very strongly believe it's related to that. Now, I did want to point something out, though, is that, Bob, you're not a criminal. You did something that is legally defined as a crime, but you were never prosecuted for it. It's not on your record. You're not a criminal, in the eyes of the law. You don't have, if a criminal background check comes through, there's nothing on your record. You don't have to report anything on a job application that says you've been convicted of a crime. And that's a huge part of the privilege associated with this, is that committing a crime, even as as a very young person, is something that it sticks with you. Not committing, but being convicted of a crime sticks with you in so many ways. It's so much harder to get a job if you have any sort of crime on your record, particularly drug crimes, which I don't know if this is the right show to get into that, but I look at these penalties for crack cocaine and powdered cocaine or marijuana or magic mushrooms or any of the multitude of drugs that we have. I'm not sure jail time or a fine is the appropriate way to deal with these anyway. I look at these as public health issues, and personal choices, not
as well.
um,
Yeah.
that's it's not a crime unless maybe you're giving it to children or intentionally. Roofies I could see certainly being as a crime. Those are things that you are using to victimize other people. But if you are your only victim or direct victim in this, then what you're doing is not a crime. It's a bad habit. Um, and I, I I think that that's a ridiculous notion in itself. But beyond that, these victimless crimes that we have are then getting people thrown into prison, and that means, of course, you lose your job because you were in jail, and you weren't able to work for that time period. When you get out, you now have a drug conviction on your record. Sometimes, if it's a felony, now you might not be able to vote. You might not be able to buy a firearm. You have lost certain rights that you've had before, and they're oh, we have a viewer question that's an honest one, completely off this topic, so I may have to move into
Yeah.
that. But it's you get to the point where you have such a strong negative force against your ability to prosper in normal society that the only option you have is to go back into the drug subculture and sell drugs for a living. Um, that's preposterous. It's just absurd that we have this system. It's a positive feedback loop, and it's designed to let white people out of it. There's all kinds of ways to help us um, get through. You know, I'm with you. I've never been a drug user myself. I've tried a handful, well, not
Yeah.
even a handful. I drink alcohol and I love caffeine. Those are two very powerful drugs that I partake in. But of the illegal nature, you know, my experiences are few and far between. Um,
You
and
know, it looks, you know, I could, I wouldn't know paraphernalia from, whatever. Although if it looks odd, weird, I might, you know, be able to guess it. But yeah, and you know, I am, I am against a legal system that is looking for what we might call either justice or vengeance. I don't want people to pay for their crimes. I want them to learn from them. I want them to pay for their immaturity in a sense by having to do the hard work of facing the facts, owning their behavior, taking responsibility to a degree that they can and that's reasonable to make what's wrong right. And to accept that responsibility, we could actually turn these so called crimes into redemptive learning opportunities. We could do that. But, you know, maybe this is a bit jaded, but I really think there's a part of our culture that it almost rejoices in the idea that we've got certain people we can now call criminals because we've now eliminated them from being a threat to my goals. Because, you know,
and now we
now
have
they,
people to fill the roles, as you mentioned before, that are needed to be filled, like the janitors.
right,
You know,
yeah,
we've had people that are college educated or very intelligent people, even if not college educated, but that are very capable of doing fantastic jobs who have no choice but to do because they don't want to sell drugs or do some sort of criminal activity for a living. They resort to working in these part-time minimum wage jobs to try to make ends meet because of mistakes they made when they were 17 years old.
yeah. It's crazy.
And the culture around us
Now,
rejoices in that because now we have people to fill those roles and we need bodies in those roles.
right. We certainly can't be foolish and open up our arms and say, "Oh, don't worry about it." I mean, people who do things that ought not to be done are not necessarily just making a mistake. There's a reason why making that mistake made sense to them. And there's something like very often developmentally going on that needs to take a different direction. And we certainly need to make sure that people are headed in that sort of a direction with genuineness and authenticity. So I'm not suggesting a system that is, let me say, less stringent. I'm just saying, I'm suggesting a system that has an entirely different focus on the stringency that we bring to bear. And I would say sometimes even being far more severe in terms of what it is we don't forgive and don't using the term loosely, what we don't allow to pass us by without really being addressed. Just the way we address it is, in my opinion, something that has nothing to do with what really makes us a better society.
Well, think of it. Hey, I like to think of it as a parent myself. I consider situations like this, and as in, is this the best solution an authority figure and somebody who is trying to? I'd hope at least that our goal in these situations is to help these people. I mean, it's not to. Well, I can't even say that. There's plenty of people who think that crime deserves punishment, and it's not about help; it's about justice. And I think that notion is a
Really,
dangerous one, and that's a uniquely American, or not uniquely, but a strongly American culture. Um, but it's I think that if we were trying to help these people, and we were looking at it in a situation as if this were my child doing this, how would I react? Now, I obviously see the value of treating repeat offenders in different ways. I mean, that's the fool me once argument. But when we have somebody, I mean, my son does very very naughty things sometimes, and I I have to discipline him with a timeout or some sort of loss of privilege to an extent. He's two; he doesn't understand it much. But if I were to do something that really puts him at a disadvantage to succeed. Like, okay, well, hey, you grabbed a knife out of the kitchen drawer, so we're not going to read to you for a year. Um, what would that accomplish other than putting him behind and at a disadvantage in so many different ways? It seems like if we're really trying to do something better, we'd be taking these exactly as you said as opportunities to say, you know what, you made a mistake, you need to take some time away from this situation. So we're still going to lock you up, but into a facility that's going to educate you, give you job training, going to take a look at the situations that you're in life and help you in some way. And realistically, if we want to talk about the costs of doing that, um, it can't possibly be more than our prison systems are right now. So I don't see why we're not going this route.
yeah, yeah. I, to be honest with you, I think part of the reason we're not is because this is why I'm neither a liberal nor a conservative. I think the conservatives are too strong on the justice angle more often than not always, but and sometimes the liberals want to just come up with programs that are going to help these people, and I think that between these two extremes, neither is really very practical. So it's hard to find a better balance. And not only that, but they end up bouncing off each other. I mean, this is true even in a single family. If you've got a strict mother and a kind of a permissive father, many times the mother becomes even stricter because she's trying to compensate for the permissiveness of the dad, and the dad is getting more permissive because he's trying to compensate for the strictness of the mom, or it may be the other way around. Maybe dad's strict and mom's and they're really bouncing off each other, and neither of them are really thinking in terms of what does this child need. I really believe that people are better off by being held responsible for what they choose to do and being held responsible for playing a role in correcting the things that went wrong, fixing things they've broken, replacing things they've taken. Now, in some ways, there's a lot of things that we can do that there's just no way we can repay it. But to play a role of some sort and to require that of people who, I mean, you know, uh, like you said, I don't have this on my record, so if I want to go do this and do that, I've got some open doors to me. But I think that if somebody has done something, they need to do something to be able to earn back that open door that addresses the outcomes they created by their choices.
I have absolutely no objection to that, and I think that a lot of a lot of where the liberal side comes down to, because I'm about as left wing as they come, is it's the rhetoric loses some of the reality. We tend to be a little bit flowery in our language. And you're right. I think that something that's absolutely, it's absolutely crucial that we have these crimes have some sort of, or not, these actions have some sort of consequences.
Right.
It's not just saying, okay, you did it here, we're going to teach you a way to avoid this in the future or something. I mean, I think that you're onto something incredible with the idea of having the consequences be directly related to what was done. You know, if you broke a window or you vandalized a wall, you not only need to clean up what you did, but maybe you need to help restore or do something to improve what you tried to destroy, to build a little bit of character there. But beyond that, we also should be looking at what else we can do to help this person for whatever. Hey, as you just mentioned with drug laws, or not drug, with guns at the beginning, this is a manifestation of something else. So, I mean, a kid doesn't just go spray paint the wall because they want. Well, I shouldn't say that. There's kids that do stuff like that when they're just bored. But you know, wanton acts of malice and vandalism and violence, they come from something more. That's not a behavior of normal, well-rounded adults. So if we have these things, we really should be looking at the background. And I guess the only other thing I can say is I've advocated consistently, I like to think, for a scientific approach to things of this nature. And it's not something that we can know what results we're going to have when we're testing something.
Or
But
that
we
one
should.
size fits all. An example of this, I've known some people who would, some people say, well, you know, I remember one time listening to a woman who was telling me, you know, I have the gift of mercy. That's my gift, you know, and 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 I said, no, you have the you have the gift of trying to make everybody feel good. You know? And when it comes to mercy or justice, you know, in my opinion, many times, if there's a way of doing it, the very person who thinks what they really need this time is mercy is probably the one who needs justice. And the person who recognizes that justice is appropriate is probably the one with whom mercy would be a fantastic investment, because at least the person who accepts justice owns the fact that actions they have taken have created a cost for which they are responsible. And you know, and but a person who's just looking for the mercy is in many ways just totally interested in, well, you know, how can I get around the consequences, and I don't even care about the people who've been hurt, damaged, or deprived as a result of things I've done. And so, you know, but the attitude of the person, the degree to which they are owning the reality of their behavior, makes the difference as to who should get justice and who should get mercy. I don't think we can have this one size fits all. If you do this, you do that, then this is the response, and if you do this and do that, then that's the response. Uh, I don't think that's a workable way.
Well, I think that we have to wrap up on that note. I think we could talk about this, and we should probably revisit this soon. I wanted to say Happy New Year to everybody, and thank you for joining us. And here, this is my son Casey came up to visit this time. He's been at the end of every show. He's been asking to come up and say hi. So Casey, can you say hi?
I don't want
We're on Skype. Do you know Skype? No, you don't want to. Can you say Happy New Year?
I don't want
All right, he doesn't want to. But thank you to everybody. Thank you, Bob. Thank you to the New Covenant Group for the opportunities that we've had with this show and with these conversations. Thank you to the viewers. I know I didn't get to any of your comments directly, but there was one a question that I think we may want to delve into, if not next week, very soon. It just says, what basis is there to believe such things as gods exist, other than humans writing about them and children inventing them to explain things? And there's a parenthetical note here that children actually will come up with God concepts independently. It's been documented, which is a fascinating question in itself. But I think that that might be a fantastic launching point for a future show. So thank you, viewers. Again, send in any more ideas that you have. We'd love to have them. We'd love to know what you want to talk about. And thank you for joining us. This has been a fantastic first year, and we've really appreciated it. So this has been Inspiring Honesty, and stay tuned after this for The Unconventional Pastor with my co-host, Bob Greaves.
Ladies and gentlemen, I hope you enjoyed that show as much as I did. These two guys are fantastic, and their relationship is blossoming. We just hope that their children aren't confused as they grow up. Tune in. Don't leave us. The Unconventional Pastor with Bob Greaves is coming right up, so stay tuned for that.